Today we have another special guest from the outdoor recreation industry, Mr. Sergio Capozzi. Sergio, why don't you tell us what you do and where you're at?
Sure thing. First of all, I feel like I'm missing an opportunity to start with like an I am a cat joke or I'm not a cat joke. So I really missed that. I should have found some way to add that filter. So I am physically sitting in New Jersey today. That's my home base. And in terms of what I do right now, I mostly do consulting work. Consulting related to natural resource management and more specifically outdoor recreation and public uses of natural resource areas.
So what you talk about consulting work, what kind of projects do you work on or what kind of things do you get into?
Ooh, I have a whole lot of different things that I do. And I will start by saying I didn't know, like when I got into or got interested in the outdoor recreation profession, I didn't even realize that consulting was an option, which is something we can, circle back to if that's of interest. Wasn't something I knew about. I just happened to kind of fall into it over 20 years ago, so showing my age a little bit here. I've been doing it since, and I will say one of the things I consulted before I get into some of the specifics of what I do is consulting has allowed me to do a whole variety of different types of work, primarily because you're constantly looking for projects to be involved in. Kind of a consultant's bread and butter is looking for clients who have work that needs to be done. Sometimes that work is more research oriented. So it's going out, doing visitor use or public use types of observational studies, visitor surveys, analyzing that data, putting a report together for an agency or an organization. Other times, and what I've been kind of more involved in of late, is actually more on the ground development of new outdoor recreation areas and sites. So one of the most recent projects that I'm working on here in New Jersey is capping a landfill and turning it into a 64-acre park, which is kind of a really cool way of providing brand new opportunities where there weren't opportunities for people to get outside and enjoy the outdoors. So really a wide range of projects. I'd say some of it is kind of more traditional, what I think you think of in terms of consultant of research and writing different research papers or management plans. And then the other side of it, which I mentioned doing more, is more on the ground actual development of outdoor recreation. I mentioned the park, sometimes it's trail building, sometimes it's building new access to water-based recreation areas, so river access, boating access, what have you. I've been lucky in terms of the consulting piece of it. I haven't always been based in New Jersey, here now, but the consulting work that I do, I've gotten a chance to kind of do that work all over the country. And so have done work in the South, in the West, in the Midwest, here in the Northeast. You name it, I've probably done a project there over the past 20 plus years, which I find really cool. It's given me the opportunity to get out and work in areas that I probably otherwise would not have had a chance to get out to.
So that brings us a good segue into, if you could, tell us where you're from, where you're raised, kind of, guide us along the journey or the path that you've taken to get to kind of where you're at.
Sure thing. So I'm originally from New York, though I don't really remember that time because my parents moved the family to Wisconsin when I was really young. So I still call Wisconsin home. My family's there. I still try to get back there to visit them. That's really where I was raised. Again, my family's still there. In terms of kind of where I started and how I ended up in the outdoor profession, I'd say it's a little interesting. I did not have a family that was super into the outdoors. Not that we didn't, visit a park occasionally, but I grew up in the city. Other than the school across the street from my house and the playground there, I didn't really have opportunities to get outside until I was or I shouldn't say opportunities to get outside. I spent a lot of time outside in the city, but in terms of kind of more natural areas, park areas, it wasn't till my parents decided one year to ship me off to summer camp, which I was not really down with, but it did give me that opportunity to get in the North Woods of Minnesota and be experienced to something completely different. And really, I'd say, looking back, that was probably my first taste of being in the outdoors and getting interested, in particular, in natural resources, which I then, pursued both through high school, through environmental studies type of classes, and then working in northern Minnesota for many years, just getting me more and more into the outdoors, to the point where then I decided to make a career out of it and went to school, have a undergraduate degree in environmental science, and then went back for a master's degree in forest resource management. When I originally kind of got into, in particular in the natural resource management piece of my studies, I didn't know I was going to specialize in outdoor recreation. I didn't even know that was a thing, really, until I started looking through like the course catalog and went, I thought I was going into like a traditional forestry program, and I went, oh, there's these things called, outdoor recreation management. I was like, oh, I wonder what that's all about. Maybe I'll check that out. And I did, and I just found it, really interesting, really engaging, realized that my passion was really in that intersection of how people interact and can access natural resources and how you balance public use versus kind of environmental sustainability. And that's really kind of guided me to where I am now in the work that I do.
So what, after you got, your degrees, what other positions have you held previous to starting your own consulting firm and going that route?
All right. So I will say, even before I went to school for environmental science, forestry, I was already working in the outdoors. I mentioned my parents shipped me off to camp. I got that little taste of being outdoors, enough so that I, for 10 years, went back to northern Minnesota. I grew up in Wisconsin, but went back to Minnesota, and I guided trips in the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. So 4 or 5 months out of the year, I would go and do that. So that was really my first job in the outdoor recreation profession. That's a pretty broad profession, so going out and kind of leading trips, and not only guiding those trips, but then also understanding the ecology of the area and being able to communicate back to the people that I had out on those trips, taking them, telling them about the fishing in those areas, about the trees, the plants. That was really my first foray into the outdoor recreation profession. Post-schooling, so after I got my master's degree, my first job out of school was working for a county park system. So this was in upstate New York, around Syracuse. Worked as basically a park manager. Started at one site that had a reservoir, so we had a lot of swimming-based activities. Relatively large area, we did a lot of special events there, and then worked at a second site also in my tenure with county parks. And that was, again, in terms of, I don't want to say like a real job, but working for an agency or organization that was really focused on the outdoors and specifically recreation. That was really my first job in the field. It was extremely rewarding. I loved working for kind of a local agency that was doing work in the outdoors, managing natural resources, bringing people outside, giving them an opportunity to experience the outdoors. So that was a great opportunity. And I will say, when I was in school, I always kind of had in mind that I would be working for a state or federal agency. So it kind of fit that narrative that I built up, that, if you're going to work in the outdoors, you're going to work around natural resources, you're probably going to work for a state or local or federal agency. So that's the kind of the path I thought I was on, until I got an opportunity to join a consulting firm, which again was not really on my radar, other than I had other friends in grad school who were applying to consulting firms, and they kind of, made me aware of those opportunities, and to the point where, I started looking at some also. Not that I was unhappy with my job in county parks, but it was something different. And in particular, at the point I was in my career, I was looking for other opportunities, other experiences. And so I went to work for a landscape architecture firm. And I'd say the main reason, this is a little aside here, the main reason I actually left my county park job and went to work for this landscape architecture firm was that they were based in Seattle, Washington. And I had never traveled west of like Omaha, Nebraska. And so I was like, oh, cool. It's an opportunity to get out and see a different part of the country that I had never been to. So they offered me a job. I moved out to Seattle. I had really, truth be told, no idea what I was getting myself into in terms of the consulting world. But it turned out pretty well because I've been doing it now for over 20 years. So that was my first job, working for that landscape architecture firm. I'm not a landscape architect, but a lot of the work that firm did was focused on parks and recreation. And part of it was a design element, but the other side of it was more kind of the planning and management that goes into parks and rec. The other thing it introduced me to was a whole world I had no idea about, which was more energy development. So I ended up getting into a lot of energy development, and specifically how energy development and recreation can kind of coexist side by side. So I did a lot of work on, and continue to, on hydroelectric projects and how you can provide recreational access on hydroelectric projects, whether it's to the river reaches or the reservoirs on those projects. Did a fair amount of work with oil and gas and how you can, say, align trails along pipeline routes so that you're getting kind of a dual use out of those areas that are being impacted. I've worked solar, wind, any kind of energy development. I've worked on it at some point in my career. Again, with a focus on, is there an opportunity to somehow kind of provide a recreational type of opportunity associated with those projects? Because a lot of times they're on large federal landscapes. And so you're looking at, okay, we're going to do this energy development on this landscape. How can we also provide recreational opportunities? That was a little side. So that's what got me out to Seattle. So I worked for that firm. That firm was acquired by another bigger consulting firm. Got unhappy with them, decided to go off on my own, and have been had my own small consulting firm here now for 7 years, and been doing a lot of the same type of work that I've been doing, working with energy development, kind of more recreation research types of projects. And then getting back, I also had, I didn't mention it, but had worked construction previously, and really putting some of that to use in the park development work that I've been doing more recently, and being out on job sites and working more as like a foreman supervisor as we build parks and trails.
And so how you and I met was through a national association. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what different professional organizations you're a part of and how that's maybe affected your role as a consultant, or how you as a consultant interact with the professional organizations and the members of those.
Sure thing. And that has changed over the years. I'd say when I first got, when I was in school and first out of school, I was a member of the Society of American Foresters because I went to forestry school, and that's just the kind of direction that they guided us into. So I was a member of SAF for a while. And let's see, after that, when I went to work for the county park system, I was then a member of the National Recreation Park Association. Again, it was what they kind of steered us towards, and it was the one professional membership that they would pay for at the time, which is always nice when somebody else is paying the membership fees. And then when I got more into consulting and looked around at kind of what other professional organizations were out there, through a client I was actually made aware of, they're called the Society of Outdoor Recreation Professionals now. Previously had a different name. A client actually introduced me to them, got me involved in that organization. It was an organization that I really kind of found a home in. What I found nice about the organization was it was other people doing similar types of work. It's kind of that community or that professional community that I've been looking for. Sometimes, whether it's in the natural resource management, the outdoor rec, you can sometimes feel really isolated, in particular in a consulting firm. Like I was the only recreation person in the Seattle office. Through the firm, we only had, 5 or 6 of us, even in a large firm. So you can sometimes feel isolated. So for me, it was a way of kind of finding that professional community, finding other people that I could reach out to, talk to, share ideas or get ideas for projects that I was working on. So I ended up being involved in that organization for about 10 years, including 4 years as president. That's how we met during that time. And I would say, it was very rewarding at the time. I'm at a point in my career, I'm still a member of SORP, where I am looking at other opportunities that, I think one of the things, looking back and the role that being involved in different organizations played, again, looking for that professional community that you feel a part of, and that really helps you along in your career. I will say, because SORP is a national organization, did put me in touch with people all over the country, gave me opportunities there, and just a great, I would say in general, a great group of people, many of whom that, I remain friends with today. I think one of the things, looking at the type of work that I do is I'm always looking, though, for new opportunities and new organizations that might better be able to address the work that I'm doing now. And that's, again, it's changed as I've moved through my career. Again, I started with American Foresters, NRPA, SORP. So constantly looking for where that professional community is that I find most value in.
Through some of these professional organizations, it's kind of funny. I didn't know you belonged to the Society of American Foresters. I did urban forestry planning for a while, back in my younger years as well. Some of those offer a lot more professional development versus networking. What is your, not so much specific to any organization or association, but what is your view of how you handle your membership as far as, is it for your professional development, the networking, or a combination or a mix of those? How do you look at that, overall?
Mm-hmm. I would definitely say it's probably a mix and depends on kind of where I'm at. I definitely value the networking piece of it, again, from the standpoint of when I was in a big consulting firm, feeling like I'd found that professional community, that network of people that I could reach out to and feel a part of. That goes now also. I'm basically a firm of one. I bring people on as needed with different projects and partner with them. But otherwise, it's just me. And so some of it is looking for that network of people, just so I don't feel as isolated in my career. The professional development piece I find as important, but I don't always get that through the organization itself. And I know a lot of organizations do provide great professional development opportunities. For me, if there's a skill that I need to learn or something that I need on a job, I'll just go and do it, whether or not it's offered through that professional organization. Hopefully it is. But as an example, recently the more construction-related work, so there were several different kind kind of OSHA trainings I had to go through. It wasn't something I was going to get through SORP, which I am currently a member of. So I had to go out and find that the professional development opportunity so I could get the safety certificates I needed to be able to work on the site. So professional development is important. For me, though, I would say networking probably has a little bit more value, just in terms of what I'm looking for in a professional organization.
So I want to transition a little bit more about what you do now. So you kind of touched on in a couple different ways, but could you tell us about some projects you've done and what you've done in those projects and the outcomes, and kind of give us an idea of what you do?
Yeah, sure thing. So I still do consulting, and I have my own consulting firm. It's really just me. I continue to do a range of different projects. I'll tell you about a few of them. I've mentioned the landfill one. I could come back to that one in a second. Some of the other ones that I'm working on, so going back to energy development, so I have 2 clients that I've been working with for, probably both of them close to 20 years now. They're hydroelectric operators out in the West. One's in Oregon, one's in Washington State. And they've been really good in terms of doing relatively routine recreation monitoring at their projects. So the one project in Washington State, if anybody's familiar with Seattle and you've been out there, Snoqualmie Falls is about 45 minutes east of Seattle. It's a hydroelectric project, but it's also this incredible waterfall. Relatively small park area, mostly just an overview that you can go look at the falls, an upper overview, and then a trail that leads down to the lower one. So fairly small. I think in total there's only about 4 acres of the total project site that are available for public use, but gets upwards of 2 million visits a year. And Puget Sound Energy, who operates that project, in part, they receive a license from the federal government to operate that project, and part of their license requirement does require them to provide recreational public access opportunities at the site. They are pretty committed to monitoring recreational use levels, in particular as it relates to kind of building out and making sure they have the infrastructure in place to be able to handle those types of visitation numbers. So the types of facilities you're going to provide, if you're getting 2 million people a year, it's going to be a lot different than if it's a much smaller site where maybe you're only getting a couple thousand a year. So they need to make sure they have the parking capacity and the bathroom capacity, and just kind of trail and picnic area, and all the different capacity things that go along to that level of use. So they've made a concerted effort to monitor use over time. And I've been lucky enough to work with them on those routine monitoring efforts that they do about every 5-6 years. So we're actually doing one of those right now. So I have a staff member, temporary staff member who works for me out there. She goes to the site. She does all the data collection for me. So what we're looking at on that project primarily is visitor use levels, how many people are on site at what time, and what areas of the site are they specifically using. And then that, at the end of our monitoring effort, which will be in the fall, I'll take all that data and I'll basically put it into a monitoring report where I'll make suggestions on or draw results from how the site's being used, how many people are using it, what areas are using it, and then make recommendations in terms of what I think is needed from an infrastructure or management perspective to kind of properly address that level of use so that people are having a safe and rewarding experience out on the site. Similar project for a power company down in Oregon where we're doing recreational monitoring. Again, looking at use levels, and that one we're actually doing a visitor survey also. And so contacting visitors, asking them to participate in a brief survey. But same idea of getting a general idea of how much use is occurring at the site, what are the people doing, what do they want from that site, and how can the utility best accommodate those use levels and those needs. So that's kind of one side. Another piece of work that I do is kind of more traditional technical writing, and I would say it's probably one of the reasons why I ended up leaving the large firm AECOM that I used to be with. Their work was primarily on large environmental impact statement type of work, so the federal project process under NEPA. There are these big, lengthy environmental impact reports. They're like, not to completely poo-poo it, because it's like some people love this type of work, but it's really reporting on what the potential impacts are from a project on federal lands. It's not always the most exciting work, but from a consulting perspective, for a lot of folks, it is their bread and butter. I still do some of that. I don't entirely, again, it's not my favorite part of what I do, but it's, again, from a consulting perspective, it's work. There's, and you're definitely, one of the things in the back of your mind always when you're doing consulting work is where your next paycheck's coming from, essentially. And so clients have that type of work. It is something I can do. Semi-related states can also have kind of their own environmental impact processes. So I'm working on a project right now out in California. This gets to be a little ridiculous sounding, but I'm literally working for a county park department that's looking at the impacts of creating an off-leash dog policy in their parks. So it's really looking at what impacts they could anticipate from allowing off-leash dogs in their parks. The specific piece that I'm looking at is looking at what that may do to visitor use levels. So are people more likely to come and visit those parks if they know that they can come and let their dogs off leash? And other people are looking more at the environmental impacts, but that's the piece of the work that I'm doing. And then kind of the third kind of recent project, I mentioned a landfill. So this is in Camden, New Jersey, which is down by Philadelphia. In that case, I got hired by basically a construction firm that didn't have experience in developing parks. Mentioned way back when I was a general laborer construction, so had a little bit of background in construction and some contacts. And so the company reached out to me. They knew I worked in Parks and Recreation. And they approached me about being basically a foreman or supervisor on their job site when it came to doing a lot of the finishing work. So the landfill, it used to be a county landfill, was closed in the early 80s. It's largely sat kind of untouched since then. The state, about, I think it was 6-7 years ago, decided that they were going to properly cap the landfill and build a park on top. So I was not involved in that piece of the work in terms of how the landfill would be capped and how kind of a park would be implemented on top, but I was hired at the process. They already had a design, but they needed somebody who understood kind of trail development and just park development in general, and they brought me on board to do that. So I actually had a crew that I led. At our largest, I had about 26, 27 guys working for me, and we did all of the development aspects. Once the landfill was capped, it was putting in and paving trails. We put in concrete pads and picnic tables. We planted forested areas. We put in kind of more landscape garden type areas. We put in a boat ramp. It's on the Delaware River in a tributary. So we put in a boat ramp where you can launch canoes and kayaks and non-motorized. We put in some fishing platforms. An overlook, so you could kind of climb up to one of the interesting things being the landfill. We ended up creating what essentially is the highest point in Camden, so you get a really nice view of not only Camden but Philadelphia across the river from the site. So we did an overlook there. So it was leading the day-to-day development of a brand new park, brand new 64-acre park. And then also providing part of that design. Again, I wasn't involved in the design piece of that work. I have been involved in other design work in the past, but in this one, it really was because it was a large site, very urban area. Part of the desire that the state had when they put the plan together was also to have some natural areas. So we did do some wetland restoration on site. We did some areas that will ultimately be forests. So planting all the trees associated with, 10, 15 years from now, what will be a young forest. So that was a really cool mix of, again, on-the-ground work, kind of natural resource management elements, and then also public use elements. That's, a really fun kind of way of seeing very directly and immediately kind of the implementation of new park facilities.
Something that you bring up very well, and I think it's a lot of why people like this field in general, whether it be specific niche toward natural resources or county parks or municipal parks or whatever it may be, is you get to do it's not the same thing day in and day out, right? And something that you like very you get to put your hands on a lot of different cool stuff. So for students, this is a lot of them say the kind of the same thing. It's like, I don't want to do the same thing day in and day out. I don't want to be behind a desk a lot and all that. Whether you kind of view it as, if you look back or look at where you're at now, what kind of advice would you give students, or what kind of things would you advise them to do if they're thinking about following, maybe not a similar career path, but a similar career path in general? Consulting may be something I'm interested in, or maybe I thought, Sergio's, how he's handled the career path he's on is kind of cool. Is there any pieces of advice or nuggets of advice you'd give the folks?
Yeah, looking back, I think the big one, and it is, so I've mostly spoken from a consulting perspective, and there has been a lot of variety, and I have really liked that. And it's not to say that other jobs don't offer that same type of variety. If I go back and look at when I worked for a county parks department, yeah, there was some desk time and some things that probably I would rather not do, but kind of go along with the job. But it still offered a fair amount of variety, and it is one of the things that drew me ultimately to this profession. Even there, there were times we were planning special events. Like you mentioned, the first park that I worked at, we had a beach, so it was how do you manage water uses? Just a variety of different things that come up. And well, as a complete aside, if you are looking at getting, I don't know if I'm assuming it's probably the same way. A lot of what that job came down to was bathroom management. So if you're going to get into outdoor recreation and public use, do some research on bathrooms because a lot of your job will end up being about bathrooms. But back to any recommendations, I think one thing I would definitely recommend, if I could go back and recommend it to myself, is to take risks from a career perspective early on. Kind of experiment, see what those different opportunities are in the outdoor natural resource profession. There's a lot of different options out there. I didn't really have a clear idea when I first went in, so I started trying things out. I would say as you get older, and I don't want to make myself too old, but as you get older, it gets harder and harder to kind of take those bigger risks. So definitely, while you're young, while you're new in the field, if you have the opportunity, try out as many different kind of career paths as possible. It really does help in terms of finding out kind of what's out there, but also maybe what you don't really like doing. Because at the end of the day, that is part of what will steer you in a certain direction. If you go, oh yeah, I really want to do that, and you get in and go, actually, it's not really for me. So it's a whole lot easier to do kind of those course corrections when you're young. Again, not to make myself too old here, but definitely I would say, new in your career, try to take every opportunity you can and learn from that opportunity, whether it's something you like doing, don't like doing. Ultimately, to me, I appreciate that variety and being able to, try all those different things out. And that's what I would recommend to other people trying to get in the field. Just try out as many things as you can.
One of the things that I have quite a few students ask me about is getting a master's degree in some capacity, right? And, should I, could I, and if I do, what should I do? Sometimes that's hard for me to answer because, I got a master's degree for a different reason than most, I guess. But when you think about getting a master's degree and you got one in a slightly different field, do you think that was advantageous for you to kind of shift a little bit and get away from that environmental aspect and get into the forestry part?
I would say from my perspective, it was only because I don't think I would have ended up where I am today had I not gone back to school. My undergrad was really, a much broader degree. I didn't really know what I wanted to do coming out of undergrad. That's when I, first got out. I really didn't know what to do. I worked construction for a while. I actually worked in IT for a while, just because I didn't know, and I didn't even really have a good sense of what the career options were with like environmental science. And so for me, going back and doing the master's degree was really a way of kind of better focusing what I wanted to do and what I wanted to make a career in. I just felt like I didn't come out of my undergraduate experience with that level of knowledge. It could be an age thing too. Like I took several years off between my undergrad and then when I went back to school, and so at that point, I think I was a little more, I hate to say mature, but maybe a little bit more mature and focused at that point in trying to, figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up. But I don't necessarily think that, just to be in this field that you have to go the route of doing a master's degree. If you're in, if you already know you want to be in that field and you're in an undergraduate program that's giving you the experience and the tools that you need to jump in, by all means. I would say, there are projects that I do where it's beneficial to have my master's degree, and specifically I look at some of the research work that I do. I wouldn't have known the research methods had I not done a graduate degree. Other types of work, I don't know necessarily. Like I said, I went to a forestry school. I have a degree in forest resource management. I do almost none of that anymore. But it gave me the tools I needed and the experience and kind of the opportunity to see what careers were out there. But again, probably not for everybody. I'd say if you know what you want and you're getting that out of your undergrad education, jump right in.
Yeah. Where did you get your graduate degree again?
At the longest name in the world. It's State University of New York, College of Environmental Science and Forestry at Syracuse University.
Okay.
So it's an interesting program in that it's a state-run program within Syracuse University. So you get you essentially get all the benefits of being at a private university, though I didn't really take advantage of any of them, but at state tuition.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Capozzi, I sincerely thank you for taking your time this morning. I know that you've got other things to do on this beautifully cold winter day.
Yes.
But we sincerely appreciate it, and I know I'll be talking to you offline via email or whatnot. But thank you again so much. And
you're very welcome. And you know how to get a hold of me. If any of your students have questions, want to follow up with me, feel free to put them in touch with me. I'm always happy to talk and help out. If anybody not that I'm like the be all end all when it comes to career advice, but if I can help you out, feel free. Put your students in touch with me.
Okay, I'll do it. All right, thanks, Sergio.
All right, thanks, guys.
Have a good day.